Hey storyteller, the opening lines and paragraphs of your story and every scene within it must grab the reader's attention and pull him or her into the viewpoint character's experiences. If they don't, readers will lose interest or never get invested in the first place. There are a number of ways to begin a scene, and using a variety will keep readers guessing and make them turn pages. Welcome to this week's writer coaching session, where we'll discuss how to use each style of scene opener to best serve your story. Hi, I'm Bridget from B Squared Writer Coaching, an author, editor, and your story coach, here to help you make your story powerful, polished, and publishable. First, I have a gift for you just for visiting my channel. My brand new webinar, The Sensational Scene Formula, 5 steps to make every scene unputdownable. We're covering a lot of material in our series on how to write powerful scenes, but how can you make sure every scene will really keep readers riveted and contribute a vital role in your story? This on-demand training walks you through 5 proven principles that every scene needs to fulfill in order to do so. I've made this webinar on demand so no busy storyteller anywhere around the world needs to miss out. You'll be able to choose when to watch it, but it doesn't premiere until January 30th, 2023, which is a week from the date when this video is releasing. To register, visit b2writercoaching.com/scene. That's the letter B, the number 2, writercoaching.com/scene, SCENE. And be sure to stick around to the end of today's video so you won't miss this week's Power Up, a super practical action step you can use in your story right now. This video is part 4 in our series on how to write powerful scenes. A strong, engaging scene beginning sets the stage, shifts the tone, hints at the scene's content and direction, and establishes the voice of your viewpoint character. A gripping opening also hooks readers and forces them to keep turning pages. The best guideline for how to choose which type of opening to use for a specific scene is to always serve the story. Determine what will create the most excitement and highest reader engagement for this moment in the character's journey. 2 of the reasons for starting a new scene involve setting, either a change in location or the significant passage of time between events. Even if a scene change occurs for another reason, we should always make certain that the beginning of every scene includes some reference to time and place. To become fully immersed in the viewpoint character's experiences, readers need to know where and when events are occurring. If a new setting will be essential to the coming event, a larger portion of the scene's beginning may need to focus on it. Just be sure to show action, something happening in that setting. Readers often skip chunks of description that have no action and don't move the plot forward. Here's an example of a scene opening that focuses on a change in location from my novel, Keeper of Shadows. The following evening, Lisanne shook damp hair from her face and tossed more brush onto the fire. Who would guess that a bath in a sun-warmed spring could refresh the soul? She glanced in the direction Jared had taken to search for firewood, but only the shadows of garments hanging to dry in the trees interrupted the light of the full moon. Dusting off her hands, she sat beneath a tree to watch shimmers dance across the spring and glitter off Raina's horn. Notice how we indicated the time in this scene's transition. The following evening gives us the time of day and the scene's relation to previous events. The place, we mentioned a brush fire, a sun-warmed spring, relaxing against a tree, so we know this is taking place in a forest. We've also mentioned the location of other key characters. Jared, for example, has gone to search for firewood, so he's not at the camp at the moment. And if the shimmers are glinting off Raina's horn, Raina's a unicorn, by the way, then we know Raina is nearby and in the same location as the point of view character. All these details are also woven into the character's actions or depicted as part of her indirect thoughts. Another way we can open a scene is with action. Many stories and scenes in classic literature begin with pages of beautiful description and poetic narration. But today's readers want action right away. That doesn't have to mean explosions, battles, or life and death races against time. It just means something needs to be happening. A scene can start when this action begins, in the middle of the action, or near its end. The easiest way to begin a scene with action is to start it either moments before or just as the action is starting to happen. This hooks readers since they want to know how the events play out. Here's an example from Mirrored Secrets, the first book in a series I'm co-authoring with my friend Rebecca Berggren. In the middle of obligatory applause for another fellow student's successful capacitance trial, Jaslyn nudges me. "So, how was dinner?" Before I can answer, our riser sinks to ground level and my seat vibrates. All the air whooshes out of my lungs on a single breath, and no amount of gasping can refill them. Jaslyn's voice filters through the pounding of my heart. "That bad, huh?" She grips my arm and shakes it. "So? You're as white as Zipsy." "It's me," I whisper, staring out at the field and trying to force my legs to work. "What? You're up?" Jazz says. She squeezes my arm as I nod. "Good luck, Sel." In this example, we have a tiny snippet of conversation that happens before the action begins. The riser the friends are sitting on starts to lower to the ground. This is significant because the riser lowers to let Celeste, the main character, out so she can go onto the field and perform the task for this test that they're doing in front of students from their school and the surrounding ones. So that lowering riser starts the action of the scene because it is the indicator that this is about to happen. You can also start your scene in the middle of the mayhem. Beginning in the middle of action has a dramatic effect on the story and on the readers. Don't hesitate to throw your reader into the middle of a high-stakes conversation or event. Here's an example from Trust Unknown, the working title of a novel my friend Rebecca Bergren is currently working on. Kaylee dug her heels into the mattress, her racing pulse throbbing in her ears. A large, clammy hand covered her mouth, and a scream lodged in her throat. Stale, musky body odor filled her flaring nostrils. The faceless shadow loomed closer, his fingers digging into the skin of her throat. She thrashed, fighting for air that refused to fill her lungs. The hand covering her mouth squeezed, then slid over her jaw. He picked her up by the neck, her locket digging into her collarbone. So in this scene, the viewpoint character wakes up with this happening. That's one reason we are thrown right into the middle of the action. Someone broke into her apartment, and as a reader, I don't want to stop reading here. I've got to know what happens. My apologies for leaving you with a cliffhanger, but you'll have to wait for the published book to find out how Kaylee gets herself out of this situation. You can begin a scene with the conclusion of action from a previous cliffhanger. In the following example from Keeper of Shadows, the first section is the ending of one chapter and the next section is the beginning of the next. Just beyond the tip of her nose, 3 hairy, jointed legs wriggled like those of an enlarged spider, and she was to be its fly. That thought was her last before the shimmering threads covered her nose and eyes. All right, that was the end of one chapter, and here's the beginning of the next. Breathe. The thought whispered past the pounding in Lisanne's ears. Just breathe. The cocoon's threads molded to every dip and curve of her face, pulling at her skin with each breath she managed to squeeze in or out. So notice there, we didn't really have to identify where she was or the timing because the second chapter picks up right where the first one left off. We do identify our viewpoint character right away, Lisanne, to let the reader know we're still in her head. The actions of the monster that is attacking her will also let the reader know that no time has passed and the setting is the same. Here are some guidelines for beginning a scene with action. You can use surprising action, a car crash, a fight, an attack, a sudden health issue, etc. The action must be true to the character's nature. An introverted, shy protagonist wouldn't suddenly hop up onto a stage at the school's talent show unprovoked and belt out a song. Show the viewpoint character acting first and thinking later. Keep in mind that action scenes should contain these 2 elements, time and momentum. Make sure the timing before and during the action fits the event. So for before, it takes time to plan a heist, blackmail someone, stage a scene that will embarrass someone else, plan an elaborate celebration, etc. So if you're going to start with the action, make sure you've shown the planning stage previously. During, some events happen quickly, others unfold more slowly. So make sure the timing fits the type of event you're talking about. The action should also contain momentum. The action should continue to unfold and progress in intensity throughout the scene. Are you finding this helpful so far? If so, consider clicking the like button so YouTube will show this video to more writers like you. We can open a scene with dialogue. Tossing the reader into a riveting conversation between characters can be a powerful way to start a scene. Just be sure to identify the speakers and clarify which is the viewpoint character. Here's an example from Mirrored Secrets, the story I mentioned earlier that I'm writing with my co-author Rebecca Bergren. It's taking too long, Jack. My stomach churns as I imagine all sorts of horrible scenarios of what Celeste could be going through. Is she alive? Is someone still hurting her? Just a quick note, we know who the viewpoint character is in this scene because we use the name of the viewpoint character at the beginning of each scene when we transition, because there are 3 characters who all have first-person viewpoints. So just be sure to identify the viewpoint character in some form. Dialogue at the beginning of a scene can be used to reveal the viewpoint character's choices, desires, or dilemmas, or show the viewpoint character's reactions to events that occurred in a previous scene. The fourth way we can open a scene is with a narrative transition or a character's indirect thought. Often, a scene will begin with narration in the form of description, a brief summary of actions, or indirect commentary, all from the perspective of the viewpoint character if you're writing in limited or first-person point of view, or the perspective of an unknown character if you're using distant or omniscient point of view. In this type of prose, often called exposition, dialogue is not used, and actions are mentioned in summary instead of playing out on stage. If you open with a character's indirect thoughts, these are not the thoughts that we would put in italics. They're not worded exactly how the character would think them, using first-person pronouns for that character and speaking in present tense. An indirect thought may be in present tense only if the story itself is written in present tense, otherwise it should be in past tense. For more on how to format indirect thoughts and more explanation of what an indirect thought is, check out this video linked above. I'll also link it in the description. If we open a scene with indirect thought, we can show the character's reaction. Here's an example from Mirrored Secrets. Cold air seeps into the darkness, biting at my shoulder and oozing down my arms to do battle with the blotches of heat stinging them. I draw in a shaky breath before my groggy mind remembers to fake unconsciousness. My heart stutters, stifling my breath before I even have a chance to hold it. They'll know I'm still alive. He will know. We can see what the character is experiencing through her thoughts. We mentioned the cold air and the stinging. She has burns on her arms because of something she experienced in a previous scene. So we know the temperature and some things about the setting, but we also get her thought. She's trying to pretend to be unconscious, so her attackers won't know that she's still alive or awake. None of this is italicized. It's part of the narration, so deeply entrenched in the voice and viewpoint of the character that it really is an indirect portrayal of her thoughts. You can use this kind of opening to raise a question that makes readers think. Here's an example from Trust Unknown. What was it about this girl that was so different from other jobs? Was her resemblance to Lily a confirmation of his suspicions? He'd been asking himself that question since the beginning, when he'd seen her picture and listened to Eddie's story. We can also use this type of opening to make a shocking statement. Another example from Trust Unknown. Dying. The only man who could see him was dying. How do we write transitions that use general narrative exposition or narrative summary? We can use descriptions through the lens of the viewpoint character's perspective. Remember, everything in a scene should be written in the voice of your viewpoint character. Here's an example from Keeper of Shadows. The Watcher perched on a step just below the uppermost landing of his lady's winding tower staircase. The sun's burnished eye winked at him through the arrow slit, bathing the surrounding stone in an orange glow. If the acrid steam seeping through the open doorway of the chamber above was any indication, he'd find no hidden exit point here. No matter, his thorough search of the secluded manor and the mountainside on which it stood had yielded several options, should the need for secret entry or escape arise. You can use a short narrative summary of what has happened since the end of the last scene. In the following example, this summary is underlined. This is another example from Keeper of Shadows. After traveling farther west along the cliff top for several days, Raina led the group to the one place where they could descend. So that first part summarizes the fact that the group has been traveling for days. That lets us know the time period that has passed and what they've been doing during that time. It's not even a whole sentence by itself. The next way we can open a scene is with a shift in point of view. No matter how you choose to open a scene, be sure to identify the character through whose viewpoint or perspective the reader will experience the events. You can do this in several ways. Within the first few lines, use the viewpoint character's name or a detail readers will recognize as belonging to that character. If the story is written in first-person point of view and scenes alternate between viewpoint characters, you may need to use the viewpoint character's name as a chapter title or scene header, the way I mentioned earlier. If you're writing in first-person point of view and you have a single viewpoint character throughout the story, there won't be any need to do this. Immerse the reader in the mind and worldview of the new viewpoint character by wording descriptions and narrative passages in the language, style, and word choice that character would use. Also use sayings, expressions, and comparisons that fit the viewpoint character's experiences and personality. For example, a character who was raised in a fishing village might use comparisons related to fishing. Just as a quick reminder before we move on, if you haven't done so already, be sure to grab your link to my webinar, The Sensational Scene Formula. Click the link in the description or visit b2writercoaching.com/scene. For this week's Power Up, if you need to change or vary the beginnings of your story scenes, try beginning a scene with one of the following: a change in setting, which is the location or timing, a change in viewpoint character, identified through dialogue or action, dialogue that reveals the viewpoint character's choices, desires, or dilemmas, or shows the viewpoint character's reaction to a previous event, action, either at the beginning or in the middle of the action, or with the conclusion of action from a previous cliffhanger. Indirect thought that shows the viewpoint character's reaction, raises a question, or makes a shocking statement, a short narrative summary of what has happened since the end of the last scene, or description through the lens of the viewpoint character's perspective. Crafting engaging scene beginnings can require time, hard work, and lots of revision. When you write, you can experiment, giving a particular scene several different types of beginnings. Then, during the revision process or shortly after writing those beginnings, you can choose which one fits the scene and the story best. Scene beginnings are just one of 3 places where we need to write a smooth, compelling transition. What are the other 2? Watch this video to find out. And for more videos in our series on how to write a powerful scene, check out this playlist. And let's power up your storytelling.